I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm becoming increasingly pessimistic about the future of U.S.-China relations.
This is Sean Jones. I'm the editor of International Security, the quarterly journal that's based here at the Belfer Center at Harvard's Kennedy School. Today, I'm speaking to Taylor Fravel. He's an associate professor of political science at MIT, where he's also a member of the Security Studies program. Taylor and his co-author, Fiona Cunningham, who's in China today and couldn't be here, are the authors of an article that appears in the fall 2015 issue of International Security. The article is called Assuring Assured Retaliation: China's Nuclear Posture and U.S.-China Strategic Stability. Thanks very much for being here today, Taylor.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. So what makes this topic important right now? Why did you write this article?
Well, based upon my previous research, sort of identified that China had pursued a relatively restrained or limited approach to nuclear weapons. And the question is, are they going to continue with that restrained approach, or are they going to change?
You know, how would you describe the main elements of China's doctrine toward its nuclear forces?
China's nuclear policy contains two primary elements. One is a pledge not to use nuclear weapons first, and the second is not to use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear weapon states. That then informs China's strategy, which is one which I describe as assured retaliation, or developing the capabilities to be able to inflict unacceptable damage on an adversary if that adversary strikes China with nuclear weapons first, and in so doing, thereby deterring the adversary from considering a first strike against China.
And what kind of nuclear force does China deploy?
So China currently has about 260 warheads.
How has that force been changing lately, and how are the Chinese thinking about it, and how is their thinking changing?
So it's changing in a couple of different ways. First, they're increasing gradually the size of the force. They're also actively developing a submarine-launched ballistic missile. In addition, they're developing technology such as multiple independently targeted re-entry vehicles.
MIRVs, as we like to call them when we use the abbreviation.
Yes.
And what is the United States doing in terms of its own nuclear posture, nuclear doctrine, and military strategy toward China these days?
The U.S. has been doing two things that I think have made the Chinese quite anxious and concerned. The first is the U.S. has been continuing to develop its ballistic missile defense systems. The size of China's force is not large, and if the U.S. were to continue to increase the number of interceptors that it has in its missile defense system, it could potentially destroy all incoming Chinese missiles and thereby deprive China of the secure second strike that it seeks. So a second element has to do with developing what is known as conventional long-range global strike capabilities, which would enable the United States to rapidly launch conventional strikes against another country, including China.
What are the Chinese planning to do or thinking about doing in response to U.S. missile defenses and the potential option of a prompt global strike using conventional forces?
In the article, we argue that they're going to do two things. The first is they're actually going to keep their existing strategy of assured retaliation. In other words, they're not going to move to a first strike strategy or some limited warfighting approach. But what they are going to do is tweak how they employ or how they implement the strategy of assured retaliation. And in particular, what they're going to do is allow for some limited ambiguity regarding their no first use pledge. And that ambiguity revolves around whether or not China would retaliate with nuclear weapons if its nuclear forces were attacked with conventional weapons.
Well, when you described China's posture, that sounded as though this was a recipe for stability and relatively high probability of avoiding nuclear war between the United States and China. Are these changes that you've just described likely to increase the risk of war?
So China's limited ambiguity over no first use could increase instability, especially if a crisis were to occur. On the one hand, the United States might not take China's limited ambiguity seriously and attack China's nuclear forces with conventional weapons in some kind of hypothetical high-intensity conflict. The U.S. could also believe that because China has allowed for some ambiguity over no first use, it really doesn't believe in no first use at all anymore, and therefore the U.S. should work even harder to achieve strategic primacy over China.
What would you recommend to both the United States and to China as the best policies going forward to reduce the likelihood, even if it's low, of a US-China nuclear conflict?
So I think what both sides could do would be to engage in a serious strategic dialogue. It's started, but it's not frequent and doesn't appear to be grappling with the core issues that we've discussed today. I think the United States could be more aware of the effect that its overall nuclear posture has on China, and in particular could be more aware of how the development of a ballistic missile defense system is viewed as threatening by the Chinese, and one that would prompt them to take all measures that they believe are necessary in order to ensure the robustness of their deterrent.
We're just about out of time now, but thank you very much for being here. Again, I've been speaking with Taylor Fravel, who along with Fiona Cunningham is the author of an article that appears in the fall 2015 issue of International Security. It's called Assured Retaliation, China's Nuclear Posture, and U.S.-China Strategic Stability. Thank you again so much for being with us today, Taylor.
Thank you, Sean.